Let's go to the Skype presence if we can. This man is your play-by-play commentator for all the big events, degenerate gambler, tattoo addict, and many more things. There he is, the one and only Jon Anik, making time for us here. I know you got a big podcast to do, but Jon, how are you, sir?
I am doing well. Happy New Year, my man. It's always good to be with you.
Let's talk about UFC 232 results. I went back and listened to your call of the win by Amanda Nunes. I've heard you pretty animated before. That might be your most animated. Did I mishear that, or would you share that opinion?
No, for sure. I think that I might pay for that down the line. Totally threw the voice out. I mean, you talk about a play-by-play guy not using his diaphragm properly. Go listen to whatever that was. But yeah, man, you put so much into the preparation for these whole events, but those fights, right? A fight like that, and then you talk about, not getting to any of it, right? 51 seconds in, a result like that, just incredible. And that's why, to your tweet earlier, high-level MMA, when it's at its finest, nothing really touches it.
The main event, what did you make of Jon Jones's performance? Pretty flawless in retrospect, huh?
I think so. I mean, I think you can nitpick, and even he did a little bit in his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, maybe was a little bit slow of foot or flat-footed at times, but this is a very disciplined fighter and a very disciplined training camp that prepares very specifically for rematches. And as he said with Joe Rogan, they wanted to attack in a versatile way on the feet with elbows and knees. They weren't going to box Alexander Gustafsson for 25 minutes. And I'm just not sure what you're looking for. The guy got hit on 18% of the shots that Alexander Gustafsson was able to throw. He's a menace, man. And I know Gus, maybe, I think he said in the back, maybe he hurt his groin. But Jon's the guy who's inflicting all of this weird damage from all of these weird angles. And, Jon hurt the other man, and essentially he couldn't continue.
What do you make of all of what happened last week? Here's one thing no one's talking about. Amidst all of that firestorm of controversy, deserve it or not, and again, everyone's going to have a different opinion, Jon still looked that cool, calm, and collected after all of that. It's like, if that doesn't rattle a guy, what does?
Yeah, Luke, there are some of these guys that love fight night, right? George St. Pierre is on the other side, hates fight night, and even Daniel Cormier really has to get himself going back there. Let's go, DC. He's not loving his job necessarily the way guys like Jon Jones are smiling on their way out to the octagon. I think Conor McGregor, maybe to a lesser extent, is cut from that cloth, but that's always been a big takeaway for me. When you watch every Jon Jones walkout, dude's grinning ear to ear. And most of these guys, when they're about to go get in a fist fight like that, fun isn't the first thing at the front of their mind, but for Jon, in a lot of respects, it is.
Maybe this is a bit of a dated question, but it's one I've wanted to ask you. I feel like you are firmly acknowledged now, even by the hardcores, as the guy who deserves to be the sports top organization's play-by-play guy. And think about it, for any team, whether it's Sean Grande at the Celtics or John Walton for the Capitals, to be the voice of that team or that org, that's a big deal. And maybe you've already hit that several years ago, but as we transition out of the Fox deal, I thought it was a good time to have the conversation. Do you feel like the entirety of the UFC community has finally said, that is our guy?
I guess I don't give it a lot of thought. I know when there's support out there from people like you and from fans, it certainly means a lot to me. It's been 2 years since I've sort of been unofficially promoted to being the lead guy on pay-per-view, but I take it very seriously, and I think people think it's a throwaway line when I try to treat every show like it could be my last, but I kind of have to treat the preparation in that way. It's like I'm not jonesing to give another guy an opportunity. I want to hold down this seat. I want to do the big shows with Joe Rogan, and, it's been a challenge, right? I mean, coming into a broadcast team situation that had been a staple for a long time and replacing a guy who had been an institution. And a big part of my focus, man, was, I want Joe to enjoy this job more or as much as his fight companion, right? So that he sticks around. You know what I mean? And so it's been a lot of different navigations, right? Different broadcast teams. A three-man booth in MMA, as you can speak to a little bit, is a totally different broadcasting environment than a two-man booth in MMA. Those are two different jobs as far as I'm concerned. So it's been great. I appreciate any acknowledgement that's out there, but I got to earn it, man. If you don't think Dana White would, get rid of me after several bad shows in a row, you know what I mean? I got to earn that number one seat. And thankfully, as we transition to ESPN, I have a long history with them, but we got to earn it in January. We got to make ESPN embrace this thing the way Fox did, and that challenge is already underway,
Now, your contract's with UFC, or are you going back to the mothership? How does that work?
So I am a full-time UFC employee, which is somewhat unique, I think, in broadcasting. That's the situation right now. That doesn't mean that I couldn't do things for ESPN and expand my role a little bit. But our focus right now, honestly, Luke, is making sure that these live events don't miss a beat. And I know January and February are going to be tough months in terms of, I think, just graphically, there's just a lot of different things that are changing, and there are a lot of different jobs that are impacted pretty profoundly by this change. I think my channel of command is going to stay very similar, and if our TV formats stay very similar, I might not feel the reverberations as much as some other guys, but we got to get off on the right foot, and this is something we all take seriously, and we're ready to attack it January 19th for sure.
Um, the ESPN thing, you were there when it was a different guy at the helm. When I think MMA was, they were intrigued by it, but ultimately a little bit repulsed as well. But Jimmy Pitaro,
Yes.
the new guy, right? He seems full steam ahead, quite obviously. How do you think ESPN has changed in terms of their posture towards MMA since you were an ESPN employee?
Well, there have always been some high-powered people in Bristol and in those buildings that loved the UFC and recognized where it was going and what it could be. And they have pushed that envelope. That's why when we launched MMA Live in April of 2008 on ESPN.com, that thing got to ESPN2, in some part because we made the show good enough, I think, as humbly as I can say that, but also because we had Glenn Jacobs, who is still running this mixed martial arts operation now 10 years later, pushing for us, right? Because he felt like the sport had value. And even though we were on at 2:30 in the morning, God damn it, we were on ESPN too. So things have changed a lot. I think the sport has really benefited domestically from the Fox relationship. I do feel like globally, obviously, we've always felt huge when we go on the road, but we go to San Antonio, Texas. Sometimes I wonder why people don't necessarily give a shit. And now I feel like if we were to go to San Antonio, maybe we'd do better than we did 7 years ago. So I think the sport's in a good place. It's also a short-term commitment from ESPN. That's why when I say, oh, we got to earn it, right? Like, it's 5 years. That is a short amount of time in TV. So they've dipped their toe in the water. I think you're going to see a lot of content and a similar embrace to the way even FS1 did it. Not that type of hour allotment on a channel, but you're going to see a lot of mixed martial arts content, and I think it's going to help us get to the next level, at least in the U.S.
I'm actually really excited about streaming for viewers. As a guy who is subscriber to many streaming services, to me, this is interesting. I wonder, as a broadcaster, and as a fan as well, how you view not merely UFC going to ESPN Plus, but we will know about DAZN and everything else. Are you excited about sports moving into the streaming age?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't cut the cord, so to speak, right? I have 3 children, but they essentially have cut the cord, right? And I can tell it's going in that direction. I'm old school. I was born in the 1970s, Luke. I like to sit down. I'm not, dude, I don't even know how to do an Instagram story, right? So for me to sit down with a remote control, that's sort of my wheelhouse. But yes, I think it's exciting. I think it's very interesting that you're going to have this great set of prelims on linear ESPN, and then all of a sudden people are going to realize that if you want to see Dillashaw and Cejudo, you got to either go on some device or if you got one of those fancy TVs. I think it's going to be a transition for a lot of people. So I can't say I'm as bullish as it on you, but I'm a big picture. I'm excited. When Francis Ngannou and Cain Velasquez fight on ESPN, Luke, right? I mean, with respect to Cain JDS1 on Fox and the launching of FS1 in 2013, and how much respect I have for those people, but a UFC fight night in primetime on ESPN, that's been the goal since we started MMA Live in 2008. So, even if I wasn't around for that, for a lot of us who were sort of grinding our gears at ESPN and getting nowhere in a mixed martial arts setting back then, it's like mission accomplished. We got a UFC fight night on ESPN. It's what we've always been working for.
Yeah, I mean, I hear your concerns about the streaming in terms of its visibility. At the same time, though, I would say no one really knows what the future of television is going to be like. I feel like the networks for the big sports properties probably have one more really big check in them, longer than 5 years. But in 10 years, what is TV going to look like? Do we have any idea? I don't think that we do. Now, let's go back and talk about TV when it was that kind of thing. You obviously grew up as a broadcaster, I think it's fair to say. I remember you called, was it one Washington State football game for FS1, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I thought get to fit in one, yes.
I thought you sounded great for what it's worth. It's just my very biased but humble opinion. Nevertheless, what do you think is one thing about the Fox deal that was really great for MMA that maybe some people don't either realize or fully appreciate?
Well, I think so many television people at Fox got the bug like we do. This sport kind of grabs you by the stones, and it has a very addictive nature to it, right? I will order every UFC pay-per-view as long as I live, even if I'm not working for the company, right? And I think a lot of people cross that line at Fox. So their commitment to this sport, right, to make it great and to make the content really good, I think really resonated with a lot of American sports fans. It's hard, I think, to quantify FS1 solely from a rating standpoint and how many people are really accessing that channel. And sometimes hotel rooms didn't have FS1 when we'd be on the road doing an FS1 UFC fight night. But I think that while not necessarily quantifiable, the last 7 years are going to have a residual effect when we move to ESPN. And I think growing this domestic fan base is always going to be a big challenge for us. I mean, even UFC 232 is going head-to-head in some part with the college football playoffs, right? And that's always something that we're going to be up against in the United States of America, And for me, too, I'm a stick and ball guy. You know that, Yeah. I mean, I've taken 8 or 10 jiu-jitsu classes, but I'd rather go play basketball, right? So for me, football is always going to be king, but the UFC is closing fast, closing faster than people think.
The other big thing I think it's interesting about the move to ESPN is not merely the streaming or being on ESPN, as you noted, but the news embracing of it, right? Watching on SportsCenter, there's constantly news on the crawl now or SportsCenter segments. Look, SportsCenter is not necessarily what it used to be, and that's something that even ESPN will acknowledge.
Right.
But nevertheless, when they grab a hold of a story in sports, it is different than virtually any other actor in the space. I wonder what you make of how that will transform MMA, either for better or for worse, perhaps.
Yeah. It's a great question and a very salient point in all of this because, as you know, the MMA news cycle is just bananas, right? I mean, even if you think about it from a broadcasting standpoint, the elements and the variables you're dealing with before our live events compared to the NFL. Tom Brady all of a sudden might wake up and be sick on game day, and it changes the dynamic of a football game. But for the most part, a lot of rinse and repeat going on. For us, it's just constant variables and things changing when it comes to MMA. And so for ESPN, right, they're always looking for interesting things to talk about. Well, there's always, it for better or for worse as a mixed martial arts journalist, whether it's on holidays, bat phone rings, you get a text, man, these holidays flip on a dime. So I think that will help ESPN from a content standpoint because there's always interesting shit to talk about in MMA.
Sure.
So I think they're going to get a big push there, obviously. And, it's just very exciting. You can already see it, right? I mean, we haven't even started. You can already see some of the transitions. And obviously, I wish hopefully we can talk 3 or 4 months down the line when a lot of things that are in my head and things that I know are coming, I could share a lot of details with you on. But, dude, it's going to be amazing. It really is. I couldn't sort of curb my enthusiasm. I'm very excited.
All right. Your favorite call from any Fox broadcast you did. Now, what I mean by that is not necessarily merely as a fan, but when you are called up, because your job is a calling. You are called upon to be the voice of that action, of that moment, of that fight. So when you think about, and I'm asking for a lack of humility from your part, I suppose, but some kind of moment from those Fox broadcasts that you think just it all came together for you.
It's tough, right? Because obviously a lot of the big fights on those Fox shows ended up landing on pay-per-view. One memory I just have to share is when it was Mark Hunt and Bigfoot Silva, the consensus greatest heavyweight fight in UFC history, December of 2013 in Brisbane, Australia. Those Australia shows happen in the morning. I'm on a treadmill at 3 a.m. First fight's at like 7. And here Mark Hunt and Bigfoot Silva are engaging in this just epic fight. And I've never seen anything like it live and in color like that. And it's, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm just praying that people back in the States, during football season are flipping the channel in a Griffin Bonner-like way to try to ingest what I think has to be the best sporting event that anyone has seen in 6 or 8 weeks. So there were so many moments like that. I think being able to lend my voice to some of these bigger moments. I really learned the bottom half of this roster so intimately over a large amount of years, right? So when I did get elevated and had the opportunity to be a part of these big shows, it really was exciting because I felt like I had spent so much time devoting myself to fighters that needed to become household names. And then all of a sudden you're calling the fights with the big names and, you just try to let the skills take over, man. I never think about a call before it happens and, just try to get out of the way and do the best job I can, man. But it's the greatest job in the world, and I'm thankful to have it at least here as we go to 2019.
Last question before I let you go. How has MMA broadcasting changed since you began involved in, let's go back to, let's say 2008, which is also broadcasting, but from behind a news desk. But in terms of the calling of
Right.
the fights, how has it changed?
Well, I think it's changed insofar as that the UFC has embraced a lot of people with a sports television background, and our group of producers, Craig Borsari leads this group now of Zach Candido and Michael LaPlante and Mike Ricci, and these guys just do an outstanding job, particularly with these analysts, right? I mean, I think when you look at the top 8 guys we have, our color guys are the best and can compete with any sport in the world. And there's a lot of good coaching going on. I do think that there's been an embrace of the sports TV thing, right? Like you look at other MMA broadcasts, Luke, and they don't look or sound necessarily like ours, right? We've embraced a lot of things. I think we've sort of turned that page, and I don't want to say it's people are taking us seriously now, but hey, when I showed up, there was no pronunciation guide. Now we have every fighter saying their name to tape, right? Like there's a lot of we lean on our strengths and our television backgrounds and bring those skills to the UFC, and I think coupling that with what they already had going on has been a pretty powerful package, and one that obviously we got to keep going.
Well, I know you had to move some things around to accommodate my request today, so I don't want to keep you any longer, but I really appreciate your time. You're one of the best in the business, truly one of the good guys, except for your gambling, which is a little bit concerning. But nevertheless,
A little out of hand.
truly one of my favorites. Congratulations on a wonderful 2018, and I can't wait to see what you guys have in store for us in 2019. And give Ken Flo my best, please.
I will, buddy, and thank you. And I got to say, man, I'm a huge fan of yours. I listen to you on the radio all the time, and mixed martial arts is lucky to have Luke Thomas, folks. So this guy could be doing anything he wants. So I appreciate being on, and happy to move the show back a few minutes for you, my man. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. There he is, Jon Anik. Really appreciate his time, and